In the summer before I went off to graduate school, I was trying to stack as much money as I possibly could. This included working full-time, taking up odd jobs on Craigslist like helping people move and tutoring high school students. One day, while browsing Craigslist, I came across an ad for work as a junior animator video editor. It paid $20 an hour, so I instantly applied. I had passing familiarity with animation programs because my friend and I had spent years trying to design a simple video game. And my video editing was quite good because I had run a popular YouTube channel when I was younger. I got the job. It was weirder than I expected. The company was in a nondescript business complex in Irvine, and every employee had an electronic badge that unlocked doors. Certain levels of employees could unlock certain doors. Being at the bottom tier, I could only unlock the entrance, the door to the room I worked in, and the conference room where we'd have weekly meetings. I never saw any other rooms in the building and never spoke with anyone who worked in them. There were 7 animators, including me. We sat in a row of cubicles in our own small room. Our job was to edit cartoon knockoffs of popular children's characters, typically Spider-Man, Elsa, SpongeBob, My Little Pony, etc. We worked on 1 or 2 videos per week, and basically we just created cartoon objects and settings. The work was surprisingly simple. There was very little real animation required. The job paid so much that I hardly paid attention to how strange it was. The company divided our labor in such a way that none of us animators ever saw a video in its entirety. We each worked on a few seconds of it, and often the project would be taken away from us and transferred to another department before we were finished. The rules were odd. The animators and I were not allowed to speak to each other under any circumstance. We were not permitted to exchange names or introduce ourselves. Speaking or looking at another person's computer was a terminatable offense. No 2 people were allowed in the break room at the same time, and no cell phones were permitted inside the building. Ever. The room was strange too. It was blue. Everything was blue. The walls, the chairs, the keyboards, the door. A blue air freshener was taped to the wall of each workstation, but it didn't smell like anything. There was one object that was read a telephone. It rang every so often, but we were not allowed to answer it. I was instructed to stand up from my chair and stretch each time it rang, but over time I noticed that the other employees had been instructed to do other things. One of them took deep, slow breaths. One of them put his head down on his desk. 2 of them left the room and returned. One swirled around in his chair. One coughed. I noticed a few other weird things about the company during my short time there. It wasn't unusual to see employees crying as they made their way through the halls. Anytime I spotted one of them crying, they always tried to hide it. Some of them couldn't. On a few occasions I saw a child wandering through the halls looking for someone, or maybe for a bathroom. When I brought this up to my supervisor, he told me it's bring your kid to work day for the department upstairs. He told me that 3 times in 2 months. Things started to get really uncomfortable around the 2-month mark. One day when I checked my company email account for the weekly briefing workload assignment, there was an email titled Lullaby. Inside was a link to a short, low-resolution video of a young girl asleep in a bed. She babbled in what I believe was Russian or Ukrainian, and occasionally fidgeted or brought her hands up defensively to protect her face. It was clear that she was having a nightmare. Behind her, on the bedpost, was a blue air freshener, much like the one next to me in my cubicle. Whimsical vaudeville music played in the background. I examined the recipients and sender of the email and found that it had been sent from inside the company to several employees on a list. I forwarded the email to my boss and asked him what the deal was, and he quickly responded that it was a joke from our partners overseas and that I had been mistakenly added to the recipient list. He told me to ignore it and keep up the excellent work, and that my review would be coming up with the possibility of a raise. More than $20 an hour? I guess my memory is for sale because I quickly forgot about the video. Only a few days later, when I returned to the office after a holiday weekend, there was another email waiting for me, titled Be Brave. Spidey, I was reluctant to open it, and now I wish I hadn't. Inside was a link to a Russian language website. When I clicked it, I saw a video of a real kid, probably 4 or 5 years old, dressed as Spider-Man. The boy sat in what looked like a child's bedroom. His mask was pulled down, and his costume sleeve was pulled up. The boy screamed and cried as an adult man wearing a Hulk costume gave him 3 different injections with a long needle. Off-screen, another person hurled stuffed animals at the kid, hitting him in the head with them, and even once hitting the needle as it stuck into his arm, causing the kid to wail even louder. By the end of the short clip, the boy was shaking and nearly catatonic. The Hulk man laughed and danced around him almost ritually. Cheerful kids' music played the entire time. As far as I could tell, the video was not acted. What I saw was a real medical procedure and real terror. Horrified, I emailed my boss, demanding an explanation. I received none after about an hour. Normally he replies within minutes or even seconds, so I left my cubicle and stormed down the hall to knock on his office door. As I passed by our conference room, I heard my boss's muffled voice and then a bunch of other racket. I was so angry and freaked out that I didn't care if I interrupted him. I badged the electronic lock and cracked the door open. The conference room was dark, but I could see about 15 men sitting inside at the far end of the wall. Most of them were dressed nicer than me, so I knew that they were senior employees who worked upstairs. A video played on a large screen at the other end of the room, and even though I couldn't see it from my angle, I recognized the sounds. They were watching the same horrific video I'd seen an hour before. Some of the employees smoked cigarettes, like they were at a fucking gentleman's club. Perhaps strangest of all, a conference phone sat in front of them, and a loud voice came through the speaker, talking in Russian. One of the men in the room occasionally replied in Russian. I left work early that day, too freaked out to return to my station. By the time I got home, I had a missed call from my boss, and a voicemail summarily terminating me, stating that the project was complete and that unfortunately our entire team was no longer needed. I didn't give a shit. I didn't plan on going back anyway. I spent the rest of the summer doing odd jobs and trying to forget that company. But weird shit continued happening, and it got worse and worse. A few weeks later, I visited my brother and his wife at their home in Southern California. My niece Katie was 5 years old at the time, and could already operate electronics better than I can. She's got an iPad, and spent a bunch of time showing me photos she'd taken of birds and insects and people. She's also got Netflix and YouTube, and watches those regularly. One night during my visit, my brother and I were on the couch watching one of the Hobbit movies. Katie was lying prone on the floor nearby, watching a cartoon on her iPad. When I leaned over and asked what she was watching, I immediately recognized the cheaply animated characters. It was a video I myself had edited. I recognized the ringing red phone, which I had designed after the phone in our office. I recognized the glass bottle the characters drank from. And I recognized the way the joints and jaws moved, all things I had worked on at one point during my brief stint at that company. But I had never seen a full video. This one was about 5 minutes long. It featured 2 cartoon kids dressed up in Elsa and Spider-Man costumes, stealing their father's beer and getting drunk. Then, one of the kids trips and falls, smashing his face into a desk and splitting his skull open. Blood sprays everywhere. I was confused and disturbed by this video, but it wasn't until YouTube's stupid autoplay feature cycled to another recommended video that I really freaked out. Another video played, then another, and another, all products of my company, some of which I'd worked on. Every video featured recognizable children's characters from Disney and Marvel and other big brands, but something weird or violent or sexual took place in them. I pulled Katie away from the iPad and put Finding Nemo on the TV for all of us to watch. Before I returned home, I warned my brother about what I had seen and advised him to keep her off YouTube for a bit. It wasn't until I returned home and started digging around on YouTube that the true scope of these fucked up videos came to light. I found several channels with child-oriented names like Silly Hero Fun Not a Real Name, Mods, all of which produce videos exactly like the ones I'd worked on. They all specifically target children using familiar characters, and they all link to more legitimate cartoons via the recommended videos algorithm. The more I watched, the deeper the rabbit hole seemed to go. These videos are constantly removed, renamed, and re-uploaded over and over and over. After watching about 100 of these videos, I found that they all shared certain similarities and can be divided into recurring themes. By intergalactic no-sleep law, I'm not allowed to link the videos or mention the YouTube channel names, but if you want to find these videos for yourself, simply type Elsagate into YouTube and you will see for yourself. Warning: the cartoon videos are disturbing, and the live-action ones are outright depraved. I consider some of them to be actual child abuse. The themes I've identified are as follows. Some of the videos show characters stealing alcohol and hurting each other. One shows child versions of Mickey Mouse getting drunk on their dad's beer, and then one of them splits his head open. This same video has been reskinned over and over with Elsa and Spider-Man, Paw Patrol, and Minions. Getting drunk and hurting yourself is ubiquitous in these videos. Also, burning yourself on a stove or getting sucked into an escalator are common. Accidental injury is the driving plot device. Search Elsa drunk hurt head or Mickey drunk hurt head. It works with Spider-Man, Hulk, etc. The phobia of spiders and insects is another common theme. I found a video showing minions covering themselves in disgusting-looking bugs. The end of the video depicts a man drinking a bottle of urine, which I'll discuss below. Another video shows Elsa, Spider-Man, and the Hulk all being swarmed by insects. Sometimes they require hospitalization and surgery because of the bugs. The characters always react with horror to bugs, and the bugs always injure them. Search terms include Mickey insects or Elsa insects gross. Drinking from toilets, eating poop, drinking urine, and smearing feces on people's faces is another theme commonly portrayed in these videos. Many of them are live action, with real actors dressed in costumes that target the attention of children. In one video, Spider-Man and Elsa drink from toilets, and also find insects in one. In another, Venom buries Elsa alive and shits on her head. Another shows the Joker feeding excrement to Elsa and Spider-Man. Any of the character names with the word poop or toilet will return these videos. Extreme medical violence and the phobia of sharp objects is yet another theme you'll find in these videos. Children cutting each other's fingers off with razors, doctors forcing needles into children's arms, eyes and rectums, and gory surgery are all present. In one, Hulk crushes Elsa's bones and she requires injections. In another, Hulk gets needles shoved into his face and has his eyes pulled out with tweezers. In that same video, Spider-Man throws sand in a child's eye and the child requires injections in said eye. Spider-Man later gets sick from eating bad food and requires needles to be shoved into his body in multiple places. Search terms include Hulk eye injection, Elsa surgery, or Spider-Man Elsa sick. Pregnancy is frequently depicted as a curable illness. Unsurprisingly, the cure is an abortifacient injected directly into the woman's stomach. The worst video I found depicts tummy aches, illness, and pregnancy in a very blended way, all of which require the use of needles to cure. In another live-action video with real people, an evil doctor chases pregnant children around with a giant needle while they scream and cry. Many of the pregnant women give birth to insects or to logs of shit. Search terms include Elsa pregnant surgery and Elsa pregnant injection. Really, any of these cartoon names with pregnant works. The helplessness of children to protect themselves from adults is a popular theme, especially in the live-acted videos. In many of them, a very large adult man dressed as Hulk grabs children by their necks, holds them to the ground, rubs his ass all over their faces, or otherwise beats them up. Search terms include bad Hulk superhero battle. It gets worse and worse the more you follow the video trail. There are also tons of videos of toddler-aged girls being kidnapped and tied down by adult men, depicted in a playful manner. Many of the men are wearing frightening Halloween masks. The children are often crying and are not having fun at all. Some appear in pain. So many of these have been reported taken down by YouTube that now the channel has converted all video titles to Russian, and they cannot be searched in English. This is the sickest channel I found, and the point where I completely stopped watching. Sexualization of children and depiction of pregnant children is a good thing. Many of the Elsagate videos depict children in an arguably sexual light. The most popular channel with this kind of content stars 2 young Asian girls and has 3 million subscribers. Many of the videos depict butt shaking, playing doctor, and fake vomiting. Others show girls and even boys celebrating their own pregnancies. I won't even provide search terms for these, just don't. It took me a while and a bit of research to pick up on the purpose of these videos. At face value, they're all a bunch of psychotic nonsense. But when I started to see how they all mimic each other and build on each other, I realized that they must have a grand purpose. The fact that there are thousands of these videos, but they all cover the same 7 topics, screams conditioning. The creators of these videos are banking on the probability that if kids watch enough of the videos, they'll be saturated with 2 or 3 ideas. Hit your friends. Blood is funny. Poop is for eating. When an adult gets on top of you, don't fight back. The fact that violence and sex are such recurrent themes tells me that the creators want to normalize them. They want kids to be desensitized to sex and violence, maybe even curious about them. The comments in the videos reveal that a lot of the viewers are adults and fetishists, perverts. They really enjoy the videos of kids being kidnapped and tied up. They beg for more and offer to support via crowdfunding. In short, these videos are designed to groom children and to satisfy perverts. After digesting all this information, I contacted my brother, who had some terrifying news for me. Apparently, he and his wife had received several phone calls from people asking for me. When my brother asked who they were, they always hung up. He said they always have an accent. Worse, a man actually tried to pick Katie up from kindergarten by claiming he was me. He gave the office my full name and told them he was her uncle, here to pick Katie up for a doctor's appointment. When the receptionist said she was going to call Katie's parents for verification, the man took off running. He didn't even get into a car. He ran out of the parking lot. I began receiving text messages from very long numbers. The texts always contained links to YouTube videos. I always deleted them and blocked the numbers. By the time I was packing up and preparing to move, the texts had stopped, but my brother told me that Katie came home with an air freshener in her coat and couldn't remember how it had gotten there. He sent me a photo of it, and I recognized it as the same type from my office. He said it had no odor. Things settled down for a while. My first year of grad school blindsided me, and I forgot all about the strange incidents. But over the summer between my first and second year, something else happened that reignited my old fears. I worked part-time at the university library. I always took the night shift because I could relax and work on grant applications and didn't have to deal with many students. But one night, an older man checked out a stack of medical books at my counter. He looked and smelled like a tenured professor, so I thought nothing of it when he struck up a conversation and asked me if I'd had my flu shot yet. I told him I had, and he smiled and turned to leave. But then at the door, he turned back to me and called out, "And has Katie had all of her vaccinations?" By the time I recovered from the shock of his question, the man had disappeared into the dark outside. He left the books by the door. I work at a gas station in rural Pennsylvania. It's a boring job, but it's pretty easy and it pays all right. A few weeks ago, this new guy started. I'll call him Jeremy. Jeremy is weird. He's about 25 or 26 and he hardly speaks, but he's got the creepiest laugh I've ever heard. My boss and I have both noticed this, but it's never been a problem, so there's not much we can do about it. Customers have never complained about him, and he's always done his job fairly well. Up until a few weeks ago. Anyway, that's when things started going missing. Employee theft can be a problem at any business that sells consumer goods, and there's only one person working at a time at this gas station. It's a pretty small place. About 2 weeks ago, my boss started noticing that we were short on motor oil. At first, it was a few containers at a time, then entire shelves and boxes from the back room. Pretty soon, entire shipments would be gone the day after we got them, and it would always be right after Jeremy's shifts. My boss has checked the security camera tapes from every single night he worked, but he could never catch him in the act. Jeremy would lock up at closing, then the motor oil would be gone the next day. My boss usually takes the tapes home with him to try and catch Jeremy stealing, but his daughter had a softball game last night, so he asked me to watch the tape for him. He offered to pay me overtime, under the table, so obviously I took that offer. There are 3 cameras, so he gave me 3 different tapes to check. I figured it would be a long night, but I'm trying to save up for vacation, so I really needed the money. I took the tapes home, popped them in an old VCR, and sat back. 2 days ago, the last time he worked, Jeremy started at 4 p.m. Everything seemed pretty normal at first. He counted up his drawer, switched off with the girl who was working before him, and waited for a customer. The first person who came in was Mrs. Templeton. The timestamp on the video read 4:03, a regular. She picked up her cigarettes and a newspaper and paid with a 20. Nothing unusual there. The next customer was some local guy named Ron. He drives a motorcycle, usually comes in every few days. He filled up his tank, got a bag of beef jerky, paid with his credit card, and then left. Next was some guy with a cowboy hat. I'd never seen him before, but we get plenty of strangers passing through, just like at any gas station. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel, paid with a $100 bill, and went on his way. I sat back and sighed. The only thing more boring than doing this job is watching someone else do it. My boss's offer was enough to keep me watching though, so I left the tape on. Everything seemed pretty normal. I had a feeling that if Jeremy was stealing motor oil, he knew we were suspicious of him by now. I didn't expect him to be dumb enough to let us catch him on camera. Things stayed boring and routine until about 5 o'clock. At 5:03, Mrs. Templeton came back and she must have forgotten something. But she didn't. She bought the same pack of cigarettes as before, and the same newspaper. She paid with another 20. That's odd, I thought, but then again, she's a little absent-minded. I thought Jeremy should have told her she already got her smokes, but it's not against the rules to sell somebody the same thing twice. That's when Ron came in again. He bought another tank of gas for his motorcycle again. I later checked the outdoor camera because I thought maybe he had another car he wanted to fill up in the same pack of beef jerky. He paid with his credit card again. No big deal, I figured this was just a weird coincidence. Mrs. Templeton is forgetful and Ron probably owns more than one Harley. That's when the guy in the cowboy hat came back in. I felt a chill run down my spine. Don't get diesel, don't get diesel, I found myself whispering to my empty living room ... but he did. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel and paid with another $100 bill. Every move he made was identical to his first visit, right down to the way he scratched his nose before he walked out. Either this guy is rich, owns a lot of trucks, and just moved into town, or something really bizarre was happening. I kept watching. Every customer for the next hour was the same as before. Every single one. I was seriously freaked out, and then at 6:03 Mrs. Templeton walked back in. She bought her cigarettes and newspaper and paid with a 20 again. I thought I was going to lose it. I only watched another half hour before I started fast-forwarding through the rest. It was all the same. Every customer would come in at the exact same times, exactly 1 hour apart. Now I know what you're thinking. That sneaky motherfucker Jeremy had messed with the tapes. He had run a loop of his first hour of business over and over. That wasn't the case. There are windows around the cash register area that the camera covers, and I watched the sunlight fade as time ran on. Jeremy's routine didn't loop over. He swept, mopped, restocked, and did all his duties exactly how you would expect. But the same customers kept coming in. I was panicking at this point. Something was seriously wrong with what I was seeing, and I had no explanation for it. I skipped ahead to when he locked up and walked out to his car. He hadn't stolen anything, but I kept watching, just to make sure. I fast-forwarded one last time, to about midnight. At exactly 12:03, out of nowhere, Jeremy's face pops up on camera. I don't mean he moved his head into view. I mean that 1 second. The store was empty, and the next, his face was all I could see. He wasn't looking at the camera, he was looking at me. I was sure of it. I screamed and fumbled for the remote. By the time I grabbed it, he was gone, just as soon as he had left. One frame he was there, the next he wasn't. My hands were shaking like crazy, but I popped in another tape. The other indoor camera shows the back area by the cash register, and I would be able to see how he got up to put his face in the camera like that. I skipped ahead to 12:03, but there was nothing. I would have been able to see him standing on a chair or something on this tape, but he wasn't there. I didn't see him enter the store at all after he left. It's like he wasn't really there. He doesn't know the security code, and no alarms were triggered that night after he locked up. What I did see, however, was that at 12:03, the motor oil vanished off the shelf. All of it. Same as Jeremy's face. 1 second it was there, and the next it wasn't. I turned that tape off and went to bed, but I didn't get a wink of sleep. My body is exhausted right now, but my mind is racing. That tape was undoubtedly the creepiest, most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life. I work in a few hours. My boss asked me to bring the tapes back in and let him know what I found, but really, what the hell am I going to say? Jeremy works the night shift tonight, directly after me, and the plan is for my boss to come in just before I leave and confront him with me, as I'm supposed to be the one who caught him stealing. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I suppose I'll have to show my boss the tapes, but I don't want to watch them with him. I never want to see something like that again. I can't get the image of Jeremy just smiling directly into the camera out of my mind. It was the creepiest look I've ever seen on another human being's face. Anyway, I'm gonna try again to get some last-minute sleep before I have to go in and deal with this. I'll let you guys know what happens. Update 2:49 p.m. updating from my phone. Apologies in advance for any errors. My boss just finished watching the last of the tapes. I told him what to expect, but you really can't prepare someone for something like that. He's scared shitless. I still am too, and Jeremy is due to come in at 4. We've got a little over an hour to get our shit together, but neither one of us knows what to say to him. Is he just a fucked up guy who likes to steal motor oil and scare the shit out of people? Or is he something else? I don't know if this is crazy, but does anyone think he could have anything to do with the time loop? My boss said he never noticed anything like that in the other tapes, but the way he popped up in this one made me think he knew I would be watching. It's like he wanted me to see what he could do, like he was showing off or something. The way he smiled into the camera was like a little kid showing you a sandcastle they just built or something. I don't know, I probably sound crazy. I sure feel the part. I'm going to talk to my boss some more. We have to calm ourselves down and figure out how to handle this. I'll update again tonight, but I have a really bad feeling about how this is going to play out. Update 4:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update 5:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update 6:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update 7:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update 8:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update 10:58 p.m. Holy shit. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. I just got home and saw my previous updates. Things make less sense now than ever. Here's what I can tell you. I went to work. Jeremy never showed up. My boss and I decided to call the police, as you're well aware. When I picked up the phone to call, though, the sun went out. I shit you not, that's what I thought happened. Apparently I blacked out for exactly 5 hours because when I looked at the clock, it was 9:33. I think I got stuck in Jeremy's time loop, and then I snapped out of it at the exact point I blacked out, if that makes sense. But that's when things got really weird. My boss was right next to me when I blacked out, ready to corroborate my story to the cops. When I came to, the phone was in my hand, but it was dead. Not even a dial tone. My boss was still right there, but he wasn't moving. He was standing up, but frozen. I looked at the clock again, and it wasn't moving. The second hand was stuck on the 12. It was 9:33 exactly. The clock on the register computer screen wasn't moving either. My phone was frozen. There was even a customer at the register, waiting for my boss to get him cigarettes. I'm betting that would have been his 5th pack of the day. I got the fuck out of there. Didn't lock up, didn't turn the lights out, and sorry guys, I didn't grab the security tapes to upload on the internet. Believe me, that was the last thing on my mind. The gas station is on a major highway, and cars were parked all along it. Except they weren't parked, they were frozen. The people inside were sitting still as wax statues. I got in my car and prayed that it would start. Thankfully, it did. About halfway home, time started up again. The static from the radio turned into music like it's supposed to be, and from what I could tell by listening to the host talk in between songs, no one noticed the time freeze, or whatever it was. I was the only one. Well, I'm sure Jeremy noticed as well. I still have no clue where he is or what he's doing. I'm hiding in my room and calling the police again in the morning. I don't know if I ever got through to them before, or if I did, whether they took me seriously. I'm scared for my life at this point. I'll update tomorrow if I can. Final update 10:33 a.m. I finally fell asleep last night around 4. I have no idea how I did it. I guess exhaustion finally got the best of me. This morning I woke up to my phone ringing. It was my boss. He'd been calling me since about 6. He woke up when time turned back on last night and immediately called the cops. They came by to see what was wrong and he told them everything. The police around here are all small-time guys. They were more concerned with the missing motor oil than anything, but my boss figured he would take it as long as he had their attention. They decided to go looking for Jeremy. We keep all our employees' applications on file, and since Jeremy just started working here, his was easy to find. They checked the address on it and headed over to his house. You're not going to believe what they found. The address Jeremy listed on his application was an empty lot. Or at least now it is. There used to be a house there, but it burned down in 1993. Being a small town, almost everyone remembers that fire. A family of 4 used to live there way back when. Rumor has it that they had an estranged son who they never really talked about, but I can't say for sure if that's true. What I can say is true is that after an insurance investigation, the fire was ruled an arson. The entire house was soaked in oil and torched with a Molotov cocktail. The entire family was sleeping when it happened. None of them survived. They never caught the guy who did it. Rumor has it that when they tried to contact the estranged son, no one could find him. Anyway, my boss called and told me this, and I freaked out. Then he asked me to come to the gas station. "What are you, crazy?" I said, but he assured me that the cops were there with him. Then he dropped a bomb. The FBI were also in town and they were going to talk to me one way or another, so I might as well come in. It was about 7:15, and I wanted to go back to bed, but I figured I wouldn't be able to sleep much more anyway, so I went down. 4 men in suits greeted me and told me to have a seat. We went over everything 2 or 3 times until they got all the details down. I told them about Jeremy, the security tape, last night at work, everything. Finally, after I finished, one of the agents said, "Oh Christ, we've got another one on our hands." Then they made me sign a bunch of papers saying I wouldn't tell anyone about what happened, so I can't say much more. I might be breaking the law just by posting this. So now I'm home. I'm not sure what to do with myself. That agent's words when I told him the story are going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Anyway, I've got to go. I have some errands to run today, and then I have to go into work to pick up some tapes. My boss and I think this new guy Jeremy, he's a complete creep, is stealing motor oil, and I have to watch the security footage to see if I can catch him doing it. I have better things to do, but my boss is paying me overtime, under the table, and I'm trying to save up for vacation so I could really use the money. It should be pretty simple. The oil always goes missing right after his shifts. I figure I'll just watch the tapes, catch him in the act, and that will be that. I had been single for a while, and I was sick and tired of it. Being 32 and single is no laughing matter. The traumatic experiences of watching your friends get married, have children, and attain the American dream are akin to the hopeless depression of the schizophrenic mental patient. I wanted a wife, I wanted kids, I wanted a steady job. I was tired of working at Burger King and living alone in a studio apartment. I was almost certain that I'd memorized 90% of porn stars on the internet by name. Disgusted by the company of my left hand, I decided to go out to one of those speed dating events. I picked out my best garb and walked out the door. Keep in mind, I worked at Burger King, so the best clothes I could afford were some mediocre dress shirts and tattered khaki pants I bought at Walmart during a clearance event. I walked into the event, trying to display the shred of confidence I had left. I was instantly discouraged when I saw all the other competing males in their Armani suits, high-class whiskey in hand, and auras reeking of nothing but pure self-esteem and conceit. The ladies there were dressed in fine dresses, some of them quite low-cut, and smelled like a flower garden designed by Martha Stewart herself. There were some serious lookers in there, and I swear my pants shrunk a couple sizes at the sight of some of those outfits. The speed dating started. The first girl I sat down with was quite young, a 22-year-old mother of 3. She had made a lot of mistakes in her life, and seemed far more than I could handle. Right off the bat, she told me about how she was 4 days sober from methamphetamine and looking to settle down with a nice man who didn't look like a walrus. I spent the next 4 minutes making general small talk, quite literally fearing for my life. Once that buzzer sounded, I rocketed out of my chair with the speed of a gazelle. The young woman seemed offended, but honestly, what did she expect? The next woman was way too old for me. I had thought that these events were age-regulated and had different meetings for people in different stages of life. I'm no pervert, but the whole idea of taking her shirt off and seeing 2 runny eggs nailed to the wall did not appease me. My decision was finalized as soon as she brought up her grandkids. I can hardly handle 1 generation of young ones, much less 2. I actually asked her if she needed help getting out of her chair after the buzzer sounded. Again, another dark look. I was batting 0 for 2, but such pitches were ones that I would gladly let the catcher have. The next woman seemed much more appealing. She was 26 and studying to be a nurse at a local hospital. She loved kids but had none of her own, which was a relief to me. She seemed well kept and stable and wasn't a bad looker either. No lie, my eyes did wander a bit south a couple times during the meeting. She either didn't notice or didn't care, as she never pointed it out. I asked her if she'd like my number as the session ended, and she consented. I flipped open my phone and entered her number as she read it out. Smiling at her and thanking her for her listening ear, no wonder I had been single for so long, I got up to the next table. While doing so, I closed my phone by accident and realized that I never saved her number, so it was lost forever. For the love of 0 for 3. The next table was empty. What a joke. If I wanted to sit and stare at a wall, I would have stayed home. Nothing really to say here. Moving on. This is where the story begins getting dark. The woman I met at the next table was the most interesting of all, but not in a bad way. She had long, flowing, dark hair, green eyes, this cute smile, and man, what a tight body. Black dress, black shoes, black everything. For someone dressed in such a gothic manner, she had such a bubbly personality too. Everything I said made her giggle. I felt like a king just talking to this girl. Dating game. She was 27 and currently unemployed. She'd been married to a husband before, but he had left her after their 2 children died of leukemia. She told me that the cancer was entwined with her lineage, dating back as far as the 18th century. Therefore, in numerous fits of emotional rage, her ex-husband blamed her for giving the children cancer and left. too pained by the loss of her entire family, she moved to the city a few weeks ago and was living on unemployment, unable to continue working at her job due to the crippling depression and panic she suffered as a result of her abandonment. Despite all this torment, she never seemed depressed about it. Either she was incredibly optimistic about life, or one of the best actors I had ever seen. Either way, I was willing to take a shot. I asked her if she'd like my number. It turned out that she'd had some bad meetings at this particular convention herself, and wanted to take off to do something more fun. She tossed me an invite, and seeing as I was a lonely 32-year-old man, she didn't have to ask twice. I never understood what she saw in me over all the other guys. I was beaten and broken, with no aspirations to better my current situation. Maybe she understood how I felt, considering all the pain she'd gone through herself, and decided to get to know who I really was under this cocoon of emotionless insecurity. I sensed a thread of compassion intertwined between all that stress and trauma, willing to lend an ear to anyone that felt the same pain as her. I was truly transfixed by her presence, drawn to her character. I had never felt like this before. We decided to go to a pool hall. Apparently, she used to be a regular at another pool hall by her old house, winning local tournaments and making a name for herself, and she wanted to check out the scenery here. I wasn't too shabby at the table game myself, so I was excited. Every shot she made was perfect. The balls just sank into the pockets, like each one was a black hole waiting for something to trespass into its field. Out of the 17 games we played, I think I made around 23 shots. She just kept running the table. It was funny because she was apologizing for being so good. I waved the apologies and complimented her on her skill, causing her to giggle more. Every time she laughed, I fell for her harder and harder. And to be honest, I was always excited when the cue ball landed on my side of the table. You know, 'cause she bent over to take her shots, as many pros do. Hey. We left after that. She said she had to get home, as she had some errands to run, being new in the neighborhood and all. I agreed. Since I had a Facebook application that I had to update, obviously, I didn't give her that reason. Jesus, what the hell is wrong with me? Passing up an amazing girl for Facebook. So we exchanged numbers and parted ways. I couldn't believe it. I had actually scored a beautiful woman. Hell yeah. Weeks and months passed on. We continued to talk and eventually began regularly dating. The relationship moved pretty quickly, and it seemed we were truly matched for each other. After about 7 months of dating, I asked her to marry me. I popped the question on the 17th, as that was how many games we played on our first date. She found that so romantic and flew into my arms, screaming yes to the skies. Things were finally looking up. I moved out of my shitbox apartment and into her home. I always admired the cozy feel of her 2-bedroom ranch house, something perfect to start a family in. As I was moving my final things in, I noticed how much of a mess I was making, with my boxes of stuff and all. I apologized and motioned to the basement to finish moving my things. Her face instantly darted to mine. In a hurried and almost frantic voice, she assured me that she'd take care of the rest of my things and that I should relax. It was a bit odd, sure, but she had been through so much excruciating sadness throughout her life that her having a psychiatric illness was something I expected. I complied with her request. The next few months were great. We never got tired of each other, and on our wedding day, the kiss we shared on that altar was so special that I firmly believe angels surrounded us and serenaded us with harps and trumpets as our lips connected. They sparked so brightly that the entire room was illuminated. I'll leave out the details of the honeymoon, as this is not a pornographic piece. She was always leery of me approaching the foreboding basement, sometimes to the point of arguing with me about it, but aside from that, I didn't see any fault in her. Until everything I knew about life was shattered. One day, she told me she was going to the grocery store. I noted that I wanted some ground beef in order to make hamburgers for dinner. She smiled at me with that cute, adorable smile I had grown to know and love and headed out. After climbing Burger King's corporate ladder, I had finally attained the position of regional financial manager for the entire state. I was working on some budget information, assessing the costs of all the franchises across the state. It was a long and arduous process, but I was getting just above 6 figures for it, so I wasn't complaining. After each report was fully completed and evaluated, I moved the files to a USB drive so I could upload them to a computer for a corporate meeting the next day. To my horror, with only 3 reports left to finish, the computer crashed. If I didn't finish these reports, I would surely lose my job. I called my wife asking her if she had another computer or something I could use, but she didn't answer. I rummaged through the house to find something to finish these reports with, to no avail. Desperate times called for desperate measures, so I took the daring risk of approaching the basement. The handle was unusually cold and the door was locked. Frustrated and defeated, I slumped to the couch in a depression. That is, until I realized that there was a specific flower pot that my wife always guarded with her life. On a hunch, I went to it and found the key at the bottom of the pot, under the dirt. As soon as I opened the door, a rancid, intangible odor attacked me like a falling wall from a decrepit building. The entire basement looked as if it was wasting away a clear contrast to the rest of the house. The heavy layers of dust upon every surface suggested that the place hadn't been accessed in years. Using my cell phone as a flashlight, I guided myself down the stairs and flicked a light switch. Surprisingly, the bulb still worked. The walls looked molded, the wood was breaking down, the stench was putrid, and the entire place was in disarray. I encountered a strong sense of dysphoria after setting foot in the room, so I quickly searched for some old computer with the intent of running upstairs as quickly as possible. To my luck and astonishment, there was an old laptop and charger in the corner, hidden under some boxes and books. Oddly enough, one of the boxes was one she had brought down after I'd first moved in. I'd not seen some of this stuff in a long time. Ignoring the nostalgia, I seized the computer and charger and raced up to the master bedroom. After giving the laptop a few minutes of power, I booted it up. It ran on Windows XP and was quite the technological dinosaur compared to modern equipment, but it had Microsoft Office, so it was acceptable. As soon as Windows finished booting up, a system message appeared on the screen notifying me that new sources had been added to the tagged video cache, and if I'd like to check it. I had never seen a system message like this before. I know that snooping is generally taboo, but curiosity overcame me. I was taken to a hidden file that required a password to access it. Rolling my eyes, I moved my cursor to X out of the program when suddenly something typed the password in for me. A bit frightened at this point, I was sucked into the screen. There were 4 videos, entitled him.avi, 1.avi, 2.I, and y.avi. All 4 thumbnails were pure black. Curious, I clicked on the file entitled him.avi. I should have never done that. The video was extremely shaky and grainy. I could barely make out the figure of a man tied to a chair with some sort of metallic rope. A woman, floating through the air, not moving a single bone in her body but yet slowly hovering around the room, came into the picture. To my horror, she brought out a knife and started slowly cutting into the man. He screamed in pain as the woman cut him to pieces. Blood poured from his mouth and all his lacerations as the woman dug the knife in deeper. His clothing was gradually stripped from his body, and after each article was removed, she used a lighter to set all of his newly exposed hairs on fire. Covered in horrific burns and cuts, the man stopped screaming and was now simply bawling. He occasionally cried out, "Why?" for that was all he could muster. Each time he did, the woman stabbed him again. She began laughing as he vomited blood and entrails. She picked up the small solid pieces of the vomit with the knife and licked it clean, giggling like a schoolgirl. She then proceeded to gouge the man's left eye out while he was still alive. I couldn't watch anymore, so I closed the video. Shaken and horrified, I clicked on 1.avi. I had to know what was going on. This time it was a young boy about 8 years old bound into a chair. He looked confused and innocent. I shook my head and fell into tears. Such a thing was not about to befall this boy, surely. This video was of the same quality as the last one, however, the background was much brighter. They seemed to be in an abandoned household, falling apart and into ruin. The woman floated over to the boy, much like she did in the last video, and kissed him gently on the cheek. She slowly brought heat lamps, the source of the brightness mentioned before, over to him one by one, until the entire video was white. After a while, the camera was dimmed so that the boy could be seen again. His innocent look from the beginning of the video turned into one of excruciating pain. The heat lamps were burning his clothes and skin. Bubbles and blisters began rapidly forming on the boy as he too screamed in pain. As with the man in the last video, he cried "Why?" and was punished each time by being brutally lashed with a belt, studded with pieces of what appeared to be broken glass. The blisters began to boil as the child was roasted alive. Eventually, the screaming stopped and the boy fell into seizures. At this point, the same giggling as in the last video could be heard again, this time even louder. She then took a knife and carved "I deserve this" into the child's melting torso as he screamed. Eventually, the boy stopped moving. I closed out at that point. I needed to see the next one. I had to witness this. This had to be stopped. With a determination, I clicked on 2.av. This time, there was no one strapped to the chair. Instead, an infant car seat was in it, with what seemed to be a newborn tightly strapped inside. Like the previous videos, a woman floated over to the child. She rubbed its head and briefly went off camera. She came back with a syringe and violently stuck it into the child's body, injecting a blue liquid into it. Uniquely to the collection, the video began fast-forwarding. At first, the infant seemed normal, happy, smiling, and carefree. As the fast-forwarding progressed, the child grew more and more uncomfortable. It started coughing and wheezing, then puking up a white liquid and crying, almost as if it too was saying why. A dark bottle was briefly placed in front of the camera, and the words "tasty juice" were written upon it. The bottle was turned over to reveal its contents, a blue liquid that sizzled when it reached the ground. Blood-curdling screams erupted from the baby as it fell into more of an unstable condition. As the shrieking child grew closer to death, the same giggling in the previous videos presented itself, but this time it was far louder than before. Determined to make it to the end, I fixated my eyes upon the screen, despite how much they were tugging at me to look away. The woman was screaming with laughter, louder than the baby was at this point. She floated over to the child again, unstrapped it, grabbed it by the legs, and to my utter shock, swung it headfirst as hard as she could at the wall. The child's head exploded upon impact, leaving cranial viscera and fluids draped all over the wall. The video then went black. Shaking, I forced myself to click on y.avi. Before the video played, I noticed that this file was modified within the last hour. Almost blinded by fear, I swallowed my apprehension and opened my eyes. This time, there was just the woman. No other person was present. She was facing away from the camera and speaking in a demonic tone. I can't recall it exactly, but here's a paraphrased transcript of what she said. "Hello. Clearly by now you know that I'm not the person you thought I was. I'm a sick and twisted woman. I love this. It makes me so happy to see somebody die, especially at my hand. I know you're watching this. And I know you're terrified. The ghosts of those I have killed are swarming around you right now, telling you to pull away from the screen, to save yourself. Yet you still sit there and watch, waiting for some happy ending or reasonable explanation for the events you have just witnessed. There are no special effects here. What you saw was real. I love watching this footage, even so much as to pleasure myself to it. But I had to hide it. You couldn't know. Your lonely piece of shit brain would tell you to turn me in. You were so desperate for love. You fell in love with a serial killer." The woman turned around instantly, and I recognized the face of my wife. I couldn't even feel emotion at this point. I didn't know what to think. My memory had fallen to pieces. I didn't know where I was or who I had been or what I was about to go through. Everything in my life died as I saw the once happy and bubbly eyes of my wife become vapid and emotionless. A smile crept across her face, one that made me quiver in malaise. This wasn't possession. This wasn't mental illness. This was just evil. So evil. The video continued. "It's quite a shame. I really loved you. We had this passion. He. Remember the giggle? I made you fall in love with me. I tricked you. I lied to you. And want to know the best part? I knew you would find out. I couldn't keep the secret forever. Eventually you'd find the key to the basement. Eventually the stench would become too strong. Eventually the decaying foundation would begin to topple the house. And eventually, you'd finally realize that my children never had leukemia and that my husband never left. I killed them. And they're closer than you think. Why do you think the basement smells so bad? You'd be surprised how easy it is to cement human remains into the floor. You stepped on my dead children and husband. Feel proud of yourself? I know you're watching this. I just made this video. I know what you've done." I began shaking my head, fearing what I knew I was about to hear. A cold sweat crept upon me as I suddenly felt two eyes bore into the back of my head. I was paralyzed. "Those noises you're hearing aren't the pipes. Turn around." I slowly turned and froze as I met the psychotic eyes of my wife. She began to giggle. I don't know what happened after that. I've been told by the police that people heard screams coming from my house during my attempted murder and called the police. I was told by physicians that I was violated with the sharp end of a screwdriver and that she placed a block of hot ice on my lap. I was tied to a chair, the same one as was used in previous videos, and videotaped. All the videos are now in police custody, and I refuse to see mine. My wife was given the death penalty. I was present at the execution. Her last words were that she would never leave me, that she would always know where I was, that she would never give up on my murder, and that she never left a job unfinished. She was sure to tell me that I would see her again, that she'd send another minion to finish the job. She finished by informing me that I would never be safe. Ever. She survived the first 3 attempts at lethal injection, but died on the 4th. She was smiling, and she giggled like a little schoolgirl right before she died. Green eyes. I have been through extensive therapy, and years later have been able to overcome the horrific trauma I saw and experienced. I still make 6 figures a year. I have formed a good network of friends, and my life has been incredible. I feel accomplished and successful, something I never felt before. I am now confident. So confident, in fact, that I am going on a date tonight with a girl. She's cute, too, with long, dark, flowing hair and vibrant green eyes.